He thought he was just turning a wrench, helping a stranger in need. A white British woman, a single mom, stood quietly beside the road, her eyes full of both gratitude and hesitation. When the engine finally roared back to life, relief filled the air. But then her words. They cut deeper than he ever imagined. This wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about identity, love, and the invisible lines society still draws. What she asked next would test kindness and humanity itself. It was supposed to be a normal evening. The sun was dipping low, painting the British countryside in a soft orange glow. He was on his way home from work, tired but content, when he noticed the silver car pulled awkwardly onto the shoulder. The hood was raised, steam curling into the sky, and beside it stood a woman with pale skin, her arms folded tightly around herself. He hesitated for only a moment. He had stopped before, helped before, and sometimes even been met with suspicion before, but something about the way she stood there, alone, vulnerable, stranded, compelled him to pull over. As he stepped out, he noticed the small figure slumped in the back seat, a child asleep in his booster chair. The boy's curls spilled across his forehead, peaceful, untouched by the frustration of a broken-down car. The man offered a small nod to the woman, who seemed both relieved and hesitant at the sight of him. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice steady, kind. She swallowed and nodded. "Please, it just stopped. I don't know what's wrong." He rolled up his sleeves, leaned under the hood, and began working silently, the way he always did. She watched, her arms tightening and relaxing, as though she wanted to speak but didn't know how. Minutes passed. He tightened a loose connection, adjusted a part, and finally the engine gave a deep rumble before settling into a steady hum. He stepped back, wiping his hands against his trousers. "There you go. Should be all right now." Relief washed over her face, but something lingered in her eyes. Gratitude, yes, but also conflict. And it was then, as the boy stirred in the back seat, that she finally found the courage to speak. "Thank you," she said softly, almost as if afraid her voice would break the fragile air between them. He gave a polite shrug. Anyone would have stopped. But her expression told him otherwise. She looked at him as though he wasn't just anyone, as though his presence meant something more than he realized. The boy in the back seat shifted, his eyelids fluttering open. When he saw the man, a smile broke across his small face. Warm, unguarded, innocent. The kind of smile only children can give, untouched by the world's divisions. The woman followed her son's gaze, her own lips trembling as if she wanted to explain something, but couldn't. Finally, she asked the question that lingered in her heart. "Do people ever treat you differently? For helping?" The man froze. It wasn't the question itself. It was the way she asked it, heavy with guilt and unspoken truths. He could have brushed it off with a laugh, but instead he answered honestly. "Yes, sometimes." Her eyes lowered, shame flickering across her features. "I thought so." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of history, of stories unsaid, of generations of struggle packed into a moment between two strangers on a roadside. The boy interrupted with a yawn, stretching his arms toward the man as though he were family. The gesture startled her, but she didn't stop him. Instead, she whispered almost to herself, "He likes you." The man chuckled gently, but her words held a different weight. Her tone wasn't casual, it was layered with longing, with something she hadn't yet said aloud. He didn't know it then. But this was the beginning of a request that would test every boundary he thought was unshakable. The air hung still after the engine settled into its steady hum. He gave her a polite nod, ready to step back into his own world. But her voice stopped him in his tracks, soft at first, almost swallowed by the sound of the passing wind. "Wait." He turned, puzzled. Her eyes, once cautious, now carried something raw, something she had been holding back for far too long. She took a breath, her chest rising and falling as though the words themselves carried a burden too, heavy to release. "My son, he needs a father." The words fell between them like stones, heavy, impossible to ignore. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. He searched her face for mockery, for pity, for anything that would explain why a white British woman on the side of a road would ask such a thing of him, a stranger, a black man whose presence in her neighborhood would already invite questions he never asked to answer. His heart pounded. He had known prejudice in whispers, in cold stares, in doors closed before they even opened. But this was different. This was a request that stripped him of every shield he carried. It was not just about fatherhood. It was about crossing boundaries society had carved deep into their skin. Images flashed through his mind. Neighbors watching with narrowed eyes. Children at school repeating words they learned from parents too, comfortable with hate. Relatives warning him that some doors were never meant to be opened. And yet another thought cut through the noise. A small boy in the back seat, asleep, innocent, unaware of the walls the world had already built around him. The woman's voice broke again, trembling but certain. "I don't mean romance. I don't mean anything but this. He needs someone like you. Strong, kind, present." The world around them seemed to pause. For him, it wasn't just her request that echoed. It was the weight of choice. Step forward, and he would carry a role that society would fight against. Step back, and he would confirm every unspoken fear she had about hope being out of reach. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the distant rush of cars that sped by. Oblivious to the quiet storm unfolding on the roadside, he stood rooted in place, her words circling in his mind, clashing with years of lessons the world had forced upon him. Don't draw attention, don't overstep. Don't believe that walls built by others can ever be broken. And yet, in that moment, he saw something deeper. A mother desperate to give her child more than she could carry alone. A boy asleep in the back seat, untouched by prejudice, still too young to understand the labels society would one day try to place on him. And himself, a man who had known struggle, rejection, and judgment, yet still chose kindness. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he met her gaze, steady, unshaken, almost defiant against the weight of what the world might say. He could not promise perfection. Nor could he erase the stares and whispers that would surely follow. But he knew this much. Love, guidance, and strength had no color. Humanity had no boundaries except the ones people created. So, with a quiet nod, he accepted, not just her words, but the challenge they carried. A promise not defined by blood, but by choice. When he walked away that night, something had shifted. The road remained the same, the sky just as heavy. But the invisible lines between them had blurred. She had dared to ask, and he had dared to believe. And that is where the story finds its true weight. Not in the turning of a wrench, nor even in the request itself, but in the question it leaves for us all. What would the world look like if kindness were allowed to speak louder than prejudice? Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't begin in headlines or protests. They begin on the side of a road, with a broken car, a single mother, and a man who refused to walk away.